Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I'm Catherine Hadro in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thanks for joining us. In this week's show, U.S. Representative Vicky Hartzler tells us why she and 55 other members of Congress are calling on the HHS department to investigate Planned Parenthood. A movie about abortionist Kermit Gosnell finally gets a movie distribution deal. We speak with the filmmakers behind it. And this.
When you hear those things, when you hear a woman needs to be able to have access to an abortion because of this, it's never a mother from rape that you're hearing from, because we have a very different perspective.
A woman bravely opens up about why she chose life for her son after being raped. But first, our top story, the pro-life movement in the United States gets a surge of renewed hope and energy following the announcement Justice Anthony Kennedy is retiring from the Supreme Court. The 81-year-old announced last week he will depart the High Court at the end of July. Kennedy, a Catholic, has ruled in favor of abortion during his time on the court, often playing the critical swing vote role. President Donald Trump says he will decide on his Supreme Court nominee to replace Kennedy on Monday, July 9th. In a letter to pro-life leaders during his presidential campaign, Trump promised to nominate pro-life justices to the Supreme Court. Joining us now is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List and the chair of then-candidate Trump's pro-life coalition. Marjorie, a big week right now.
Indeed, Catherine.
This is major. And you are a big reason why President Trump promised he would nominate a pro-life Supreme Court justice. What do we mean by that? What is a pro-life judge?
Well, by God's grace and some specific requests, he did commit to only nominating pro-life justice. And what that means is a constitutionalist judge, a judge who reads the Constitution and interprets it as the founders wrote it, not in the way that he or she prefers for it to be, that doesn't legislate from the bench, that really looks to see what the text of the Constitution really is. When you do that, you come up with a pro-life position because you cannot find abortion or the abortion right anywhere in the Constitution. It had to be made up, and it was.
And the big question right now is whether or not we will soon see Roe v. Wade overturned. So what needs to happen for the court to even consider that?
Well, there are hundreds of laws that have been passed all over the country that will be making their ways to the court. Some will, some won't, obviously. There are a couple of 15-week bills in Louisiana and Mississippi. There's a couple of Down syndrome bills in Indiana and Ohio. There's dismemberment bills.
Bills banning abortion at these different points.
Yeah, and so all of those are making their way up. Any one of those could be that moment where it's overturned. It'll all depend upon who's on the court, the specifics of the case, and whether Roe is begging the question or not.
President Trump says he will not ask the Supreme Court nominees about their view on Roe v. Wade. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a reasonable position to take because if he asks the question, they simply can't answer it in good faith or with integrity. They have to be looking at the case that they literally being asked, one of those cases or another that I just mentioned, not the case that they hope for it to be. So the details of the case, the context of the case are very, very important. Having said that, everybody on the list of potential nominees are very solid. They're constitutionalists, strict constructionist type judges. So we think that we have every hope that this is a very, very good moment in our history and that they will be poised to really start to give back to the people the right to legislate on this issue.
Now, in order to actually confirm one of these nominees, a simple majority is needed in the Senate, for the Senate to do that. So what must be done in the coming weeks and months to ensure that we do confirm a justice?
Yeah, well, that's the pressing question. In addition to deep prayer every single day, we have to look at the lay of the land, and that includes 49 pro-life Republicans, 2 pro-abortion Republicans. Those 2 voted for Gorsuch, but we can't take anything for granted. Then we have 3 pro-life Democrats, sometimes pro-life, sometimes not, that voted for Gorsuch, but we can't take them for granted either. And why do I say that? Because you can't underestimate the moment that we are in and what's at stake for the left. They are already committing millions and millions. The pressure on the party, the pressure from the party, and the pressure from the pro-abortion movement will be intense.
Finally, Marjorie, I'm just curious, do you have a personal favorite, someone you're hoping President Trump picks to be his nominee?
Well, I'm talking to the White House almost every day and talking to Federalist Society and Leonard Leo. These are people who are very much in the center of this decision-making process, and of course we want to be as well. As much as we can, we, look, I can't help but say that Amy Barrett is the model of what the Susan B. Anthony list and would want to press forward in terms of a great judge. She is a Catholic mom of 7, beloved by her students, universally admired by her colleagues. They all signed a letter saying no matter what their reviews were, they love her. She would be a beautiful counter to the women that are currently on the bench, really giving the lie, potentially giving the lie to the idea that somehow abortion is the great liberator, and without it, we can't be happy or free.
We'll just have to see who it is.
Amen.
Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
All eyes are on the Supreme Court as Justice Anthony Kennedy announces his retirement, and the U.S. waits to see who will fill his vacant seat. This is a pivotal moment for the pro-life movement in particular. Justice Kennedy has been a swing vote on abortion for decades. Now, there is new opportunity to replace him with a justice who believes in the Constitution and the right to life. The next justice could be the deciding vote in a possible future case that could overturn the Roe v. Wade decision. For this week's call to action, we are going to tell you how to be engaged during this critical time. Go to ProLifeCourt.com. Again, go to your computer or smartphone and type in ProLifeCourt.com into your web browser. Here you can sign up to become what we're calling a first responder, to be the first to get updates and opportunities to take action to help President Donald Trump confirm a nominee to the Supreme Court who respects life. All you need to do is sign up, type in your name, email address, and zip code so we can bring you updates and opportunities for action. Again, the significance here cannot be overstated. Nominating and confirming a new Supreme Court justice is a critical step towards overturning the devastating Roe v. Wade decision. During this time, you can join the Pro-Life Court Coalition simply by signing up at ProLifeCourt.com. That is ProLifeCourt.com. Turning now to another story, the fight to defund Planned Parenthood continues in the United States. More than 50 members of Congress are calling on the Department of Health and Human Services to investigate the nation's largest abortion provider, after a new report chronicled a long-standing pattern of the business's failure to report the sexual abuse of minors. The report, released by the pro-life group Live Action, includes accounts from victims who have been to Planned Parenthood, former employee testimonies, state health department records, and undercover footage. We break this all down with our next guest. Representative Vicky Hartzler of Missouri joins us now from Capitol Hill. Congresswoman, thank you for your time.
You bet, glad to be here.
The pro-life group Live Action recently released an investigative report alleging Planned Parenthood has covered up child sexual abuse and sex trafficking at locations across the U.S. First off, what's your reaction to these findings?
Well, it is just abhorrent and it's unacceptable. Here's an agency that claims to be supportive of women and for girls, and yet this Live Action report documents that over a decade, Planned Parenthood has a repeated pattern of facilitating or allowing the sexual abuse of children by not reporting these incidents or asking the questions that need to be asked. And their funding needs to be stripped and they need to be investigated, and that's why I led a letter to Health and Human Services along with many of my colleagues here in the House of Representatives, asking that they investigate Planned Parenthood to find out how prevalent this really is beyond the report that was published, and to take action to see that their funding is stripped.
And I want to speak more on that letter because you, as you mentioned, along with at least 50 of your colleagues, have asked the Department of Health and Human Services to respond to these allegations of abuse cover-up. Can you walk us through more of the specifics of what you're asking HHS to do and what you're expecting?
Well, we're asking that for all the records of young people who have used their services, who could fit in this category of teenagers who have been sexually abused by their children, by their a parent or someone else in their household. And we want to know how many times Health and Human Services asked or acted on concerns in the past with Planned Parenthood not reporting that. So we want to know how many times HHS has investigated or asked Planned Parenthood for this information, and we want to determine, if there have been actions taken by Health and Human Services to address this concern in the past, or if this is just a new revelation that was brought out by this report.
Based on what we're speaking about right now, has the abortion industry created a safe haven for sexual abuse to thrive, in your opinion?
Well, I think so. We have information from past employees at Planned Parenthood who said that they were told to not ask too many questions, and it was just too much hassle to file things as abuse. Instead, they actually changed the record at some times to indicate it wasn't abuse. And these are just clear, horrific violations of the law. As part of their contract with the family planning money since the 90s, it has been part of the stipulation that anybody who receives that has to follow the state reporting laws regarding child sexual abuse. And so they clearly have not been asking those questions, or even when they knew about instances where a child was being abused, they did not report it. And that is just unacceptable.
Congresswoman, we're at the height of the Me Too movement right now. Have you heard or seen universal outrage in response to Planned Parenthood's alleged cover-up of abuse?
I have not, and it certainly should be. Child sexual abuse is not acceptable at all, and everybody should speak out against it, including the Me Too movement.
Representative Vicky Hartzler of Missouri, thank you for your leadership on this, and thank you for your time today.
You're welcome.
We go now to pro-life headlines from around the globe. Spain's lower house of parliament agrees to consider a bill that would legalize euthanasia in the country. If passed, adults with serious chronic disability or terminal illness could request assisted suicide funded by the health system. Spanish bishops recently spoke out against euthanasia, arguing what patients and families really want is help to deal with challenges. Britain's Court of Appeal rejects an attempt from a terminally ill man to overturn the country's blanket ban on assisted suicide. The 68-year-old man with a motor neuron disease argued outlawing assisted suicide infringes upon the European Convention on Human Rights. The court ruled that decision needs to be made by politicians and parliament. And in Argentina last week, 3,000 health professionals and pro-lifers gathered together outside a hospital in a symbol to protect life for mothers and unborn children. They said abortion goes against the Hippocratic Oath, which calls for the preservation and protection of life from the moment of conception. Argentina's lower house of Congress recently approved a bill to legalize abortion. It's now gone to the Senate. It took years to get there, but finally, the film about the notorious Philadelphia abortionist Kermit Gosnell will hit theaters this October. Gosnell, the trial of America's biggest serial killer, will be released in at least 600 theaters across the U.S. on October 12th. The film centers around the true story of the investigation and trial of abortionist Kermit Gosnell. Gosnell is serving life in prison after being convicted of 3 first-degree murder charges for killing babies who had been born alive after his failed abortion attempts. The Gosnell movie was one of the most successfully crowdfunded films in history. Almost 30,000 people donated over $2.3 million in 45 days so it could be made. And joining us now is one of the producers behind the Gosnell movie, Phelim McAleer. Thanks for being with us, and congratulations on the film getting picked up.
Thank you. It's been a long, hard struggle, but it's happened. I'm sure a lot of your viewers were the people who crowdfunded it a few years back, and I want to thank them. Thanks for their patience. It's been very difficult, but we came out with a great movie, and it's been picked up now.
And I'd like you to speak more on that, because I think a lot of people are wondering, why did it take so long for this movie to get picked up by a movie distributor? Can you summarize that journey and some of the setbacks?
Well, why did it take so long? I think your viewers know exactly why it takes so long to get a movie out in Hollywood that might shine a negative light on abortion. This is Hollywood. You know, they don't want anything that might question their beliefs or shatter their faith. You know, and for them, abortion and these things, it's like a religious belief. So you know, there was real hostility to this film. So Hollywood wouldn't fund it. That's why we had it crowdfunded. Hollywood wouldn't distribute it. Lots of distributors said, "Great film, important film, just too controversial for us," and that's nonsense. What they meant was it's the wrong kind of controversy. They didn't want to touch this.
What kind of film, Phelim, do you classify this as? What can viewers expect?
Well, first of all, I really want to reassure viewers, there's nothing gory in it. There's nothing distressing in it, believe it or not. It's like a Law and Order episode. It's the trial of Kermit Gosnell. Gosnell, the trial of America's biggest serial killer. So you hear evidence, but you don't see anything. There's flashbacks. It's about the investigation and the trial of someone who was one of the most protected criminals, the most protected mass murderer in American history. He's the biggest killer in American history, but boy, was he protected. Protected by the political class in Pennsylvania, but also by the legal class who didn't want to take this on. Bodies were coming out of this clinic every month, but that clinic wasn't inspected for 17 years because the governor took a decision that would interfere with reproductive rights. And I want to make clear to people in EWTN, it was a Republican governor who started this. But yes, it's very important to tell people there's nothing gory. We just got our MPAA rating. It's PG-13. It's important. We've shown it to families with teenage children, and they are so happy that their teenage children got to see it, because this is exactly how the trial went down. This is the truth. This is not an agenda.
And for those who don't know, you picked up on the Gosnell story not because you considered yourself a pro-lifer, but because you and your wife and fellow producer Ann McEleer are both journalists. With that being said, what is the reason you wanted to create this movie?
Yeah, we went in as journalists. You know, this is a serial killer. This is a cover-up too. I mean, this is a classic Hollywood movie, by the way. It's a serial killer covered up by high-powered political establishment-type figures. Of course, Hollywood didn't want to touch this. I walked into that trial in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and in front of me were the most horrific pictures I'd ever seen. I listened to the evidence. I couldn't believe it. But behind me was the most shocking thing of all. No press. Just a couple of local journalists, no national press. And this guy has killed hundreds, if not thousands of people in a 30-year killing spree. So when I see cover-up, when I see crime, when I see investigation, political intrigue, that's a great Hollywood movie. And that's how we came into it.
And our viewers may recognize actor Dean Cain in the film. He portrays Detective Jim Wood. Were any of the actors hesitant to be in a film involving one of the most controversial topics, abortion?
They all realize this could damage their career, but you know, Dean Cain, he's such a man of integrity. You know, he always does the right thing. We had other actors for other roles who said, "Oh yeah, I'll take that role." Then they'd go off and talk to their friends, and suddenly they'd say, "Oh, I just realized I'm going on vacation for a month. I'd forgotten about it." So you know, all these excuses about why they couldn't do the film. So yeah, people took a risk by doing it, but the script is compelling because it's the truth.
Phelim McAleer, thank you for your time, and we'll be watching for that October viewing date.
Thank you.
When we come back.
I remember thinking, okay, I couldn't protect myself. You know, I fought and I tried, but there was nothing I could do, but I could protect that baby.
A courageous woman opens up about why she chose life for her son after being violently raped. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Hadro. With the announcement of Justice Kennedy's exit from the Supreme Court, it seems there is mass hysteria in the media right now, all centered around abortion. That's this week's Speak Out segment. Here's a small sample of the abortion alarmism out there. The president of the pro-abortion group NARAL penned an article for Marie Claire magazine titled, "I'm the president of NARAL. Roe v. Wade is in grave danger." Actor and comedian Michael Ian Black tweeted, "Stock up on abortions now. Roe v. Wade is gone." And Entertainment Weekly executive editor Carla Sosenko tweeted this disturbing message. If you are a woman and a friend of mine with a birthday coming up soon, I'm getting you an abortion for a present while I still can. Enjoy it. #JusticeKennedy. The dark, twisted humor on display speaks volumes about the pro-abortion movement. Their efforts to stir up alarm, to stir up hysteria, show how they manipulate others using fear. We will continue to see this mass hysteria all over the media in the coming weeks and months as President Trump nominates a Supreme Court justice and the Senate proceeds with confirmation hearings. Be prepared for that. This is the time, pro-lifers, to equip yourself with facts, to dive deeply into pro-life apologetics and be prepared to answer questions about abortion. But in stark contrast to abortion advocates who use dooming and dark language when describing a Supreme Court justice who recognizes the right to life, let us present our thoughts calmly and peacefully. Again, this is a critical time for the pro-life movement, but we don't operate out of fear. We operate out of truth, hope, and love. Remember, there is always something you can do to counter today's culture of death by following this week's call to action. Go to ProLifeCourt.com to join the Pro-Life Court Coalition and get the latest updates on the fight to confirm a pro-life Supreme Court justice. One of the most common and difficult questions facing pro-lifers today is this: what about allowing abortion in cases of rape? For this week's Pro-Life Focus, our next guest will speak for herself in answering that question.
My name is Jennifer Christie.
Up until 4.5 years ago, sign language interpreter Jennifer Christie was a wife and mother of 4. But Christie's life underwent a radical change one January winter.
I'm here tonight to represent the 32,000 women a year who become pregnant after rape, and the 75% of us who give our children life.
As she testifies and shares publicly today, Jennifer Christie is a survivor of and mother from rape. As hard as it is to talk about, can you share with us what happened? Take us back to January of 2014.
Right. Okay. So I've shared this a lot, and it has not gotten easier. Okay.
Jennifer tells us she was staying at a hotel alone while traveling for work. On the last day of her 2-week trip, her job let out early because of snowfall. She went back to her hotel.
I walked up to my room and didn't know that I was being followed. I couldn't hear anything. It was very windy, and I had my scarf up and all that. And I got my door open, and I dropped everything on the floor and turned around to close my door, and there was a man in my doorway. I thought, with the weather, I thought maybe his car broke down, or maybe he needed to use my phone or something, and all this kind of went through my mind in like a second. And then he kind of gave me a strange smile and punched me in the head.
Jennifer tried to fight as the man proceeded to assault and rape her. She eventually passed out. Jennifer then awoke to a woman's scream when she discovered she was wearing only a scrap of clothing and laying outside in a stairwell near the dumpster.
But I remember trying to move and realizing that I was very hurt. And I tried to pick myself up, and I looked at my hands, and there was blood on them, and my nails were all cracked and broken, and I just remembered fighting.
Jennifer was taken to the hospital and treated for fractured ribs, broken fingers, a brain bleed, and severe internal damage. She's since undergone multiple surgeries. As a few weeks passed and her body began to heal, Jennifer and her husband decided she'd move forward with work to keep herself preoccupied. She left for a business trip on a cruise when she got very sick.
One of the head doctors came in to me and she said, we're going to need to give you an IV. Is there any chance you could be pregnant?
Christie immediately thought no. Her husband had a vasectomy.
And then I stopped and I thought, and for the first time out loud, I said, I was raped. And it's just an ugly, ugly word. And I just had this feeling in my stomach, and I said, you might want to test me.
The pregnancy test was positive, so the cruise ship made an emergency stop in Colombia for an ultrasound.
On that screen, I saw this tiny little pea. And this was the darkest time in my life, and I, for the first time since the assault, looking at that little dot on the screen, I just felt something come alive in me again. And I felt hope and joy and light. And I remember thinking, okay, I couldn't protect myself. You know, I fought and I tried, but there was nothing I could do, but I could protect that baby. And it was my baby.
And when you told your husband, how did he respond to the news?
I called him and I said, are you sitting down? And he said, what's wrong? I said, I'm pregnant. And there was just a second of silence, and he said, okay. I said, okay, what? Okay, like what is, I need more from you, okay, expand. And he said, sweetheart, he said, this is a gift. He said, this is something beautiful. It's from something so painful and terrible for us. He said, we love babies. And I said, yeah, we love babies. And he said, we can do this.
With a supportive husband by her side, Jennifer welcomed a son into the world. Now, her very youngest, as she calls him, is an integral part of the family.
He is just this bright spot. He's just joy and laughter and silliness, as you know. He's 3 now, so which they happen to be, but even when he was a baby, he was just nothing but, you know, big dimpled smiles and all kinds of joy, and the kids just adore him.
I asked Jennifer, a devout Christian, how her faith in God has held up throughout the journey these past 4 years.
When I tell my story, people who are not believers will say, well, where was your God when that happened? You know, and where was your God then? And I think my God was all over that. My God was all over my story. My God was in the fact that I was being dragged away from the scene and would probably be killed, and you know, someone stepped in and interrupted me being dragged away, and my life was spared. My God was in the fact that I was left in the snow, which controlled the swelling in my brain, and I'm still here. My God was in the fact that I have this child who people would consider, you know, something horrific, but has been such a joy and kept me going, gave me a reason to want to press on.
Jennifer, we hear often, even from people who identify as pro-life, this excuse for abortions in the cases of rape. People who make this exception, saying it's not fair for the mother. This child would be a reminder of the trauma of rape. But Jennifer, what's been your experience?
Not that at all. I feel like a broken record saying my son is healing, but I can't imagine getting through the last few years without him, without having his light and his life to look forward to. I've never looked at him and seen anything but him. What we're going to be able to tell our son one day is that none of us would be the people that we are today without you. And that's, you know, that's what God did for us.
Again, I want to thank Jennifer Christie for the great courage she showed in sharing her story with us. That's it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Until next week, you can reach us anytime with questions, ideas, comments. Just email us at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. And remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.